Good afternoon. My name is Chrissy Matheson, and I'll be your moderator for today's press briefing. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board, Karen Casey. She'll do a short presentation, and then we will go to the media for questions. Additionally, we have Jeff Gation, who's also our Associate Deputy Minister and Controller for the Department of Finance and Treasury Board. Welcome.
Thank you, Chrissy, and good morning. Today I'm presenting the government's 2019-20 public accounts. This closes the books on the fiscal year 2019-20. It reports actual financial results compared to the budget that was introduced March 26th of 2019. The Acting Auditor General has given his unmodified opinion of the public accounts and the fiscal position, and the results that are presented fairly. This budget supported investments in health care, in children's learning, development, and well-being, and in our youth and our workforce. It invested in infrastructure, in our communities, and in our economy. It was our fourth consecutive balanced budget. Nova Scotia's growing economy and strong fiscal foundation helped lessen the financial impact of COVID-19 in the 2019-20 year. Before the COVID pandemic, Nova Scotia was on track for fiscal sustainability. A growing economy with increased revenues in combination with government's focus on fiscal management strengthened that position. Our population was at an all-time high. Our unemployment rate was the lowest since 1974. Our employment growth was the fastest since 2004. Our real GDP growth was the fastest since 2010. Wage growth was faster than any other province. Growth in residential investments was sustained at a high level. Consumer spending continued to rise. Retail sales continued to rise. Export of goods to other countries was growing. And all of this combined to put Nova Scotia at the end of 2019 in a very strong economic position. This was an advantage to us when COVID-19 arrived. However, the impact of our COVID-19 response has been significant. The month of March saw the beginning of that impact. Government was able to respond quickly to prepare the health sector for the pandemic and to provide support to Nova Scotians and businesses as we worked to flatten the curve. Our immediate response included $120 million in COVID-19 related costs funded out of the 19-20 budget. As our public accounts show, we maintained a balanced budget for 2019-20 due to that very strong financial position. We are reporting a balance of $2.3 million for the year ending March 31, 2020. At year end, our net debt was $15.24 billion and net debt to GDP was at 33.1%. Total consolidated revenues were $12.344 billion, which was an increase in revenue of $454.1 million from estimate. Total consolidated expenses were $12.342 billion, an increase of $485 million from estimate. This increase in expenses includes additional funding for healthcare services, additional funding for the remediation of Boat Harbor, and COVID-19 support for healthcare, the childcare sector, and for vulnerable Nova Scotians. It also includes $100 million in funding provided through a contribution agreement with Dalhousie University to provide COVID-19 support for individual Nova Scotians and for our businesses. These supports include the Small Business Reopening and Support Grant, Small Business Impact Grant. Other supports included the Workers' Emergency Bridge Fund, which was administered by the Red Cross, Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance, administered by Central Mortgage and Housing, COVID Credit and Support Program, which is administered by the Credit Union, and the Nova Scotia Deferral Guarantee Program. all programs which our government was able to support in order to help those in need. Our province was strong coming into this pandemic, and we will continue to focus on the health and well-being of Nova Scotians, and we will continue to apply the same principles of good fiscal management as we move through the recovery phase in the months ahead. I will now entertain questions. Chrissy?
Just a reminder that we're doing the one question, one follow-up format for this piece of the presentation. And I will go to the phones after I circulate through the room. We'll start with Rebecca Brown with All Nova Scotia.
So how much was Dow paid to administer the COVID-19 support programs?
I'm not aware of what the administrative costs would be, but we can certainly find that.
I can go to Jeff. I believe he does.
Jeff, do you have those? Okay.
I received a text. There's no management fee to Dalhousie in the agreement. They're not. No, they're allowed to pay if they need to contract a third-party provider to help deliver an element of support, but there's no administrative fee to Dalhousie.
Okay, so all the money they get goes directly to programs.
Correct.
And my follow-up is, so why is funding for the programs being topped up to $100 million, and on what exactly will that money be spent?
Initially, when our government looked at businesses and individuals who were needing support as a result of COVID, we set aside $50 million, which we felt would respond to those needs, and it did. And as we continued to look at ongoing needs from businesses, because $50 million did not resolve all of those needs, we were able to add the additional 50, which made a total of $100 million. I understand that most of the first $50 million has already gone out to individuals and businesses, but there's more need, and our commitment was to help meet that need.
Next question will go to Mike Gorman with CBC.
Let's stay there, please, Minister. We understand that the $50 million's been approved and is now going to go to Dow. What's it going to be used for?
It will depend on the applications that come in and the interest that come in from individuals. There's an advisory committee of government that will be working with senior management at Dalhousie, and they will be looking at needs that are identified and how they can best respond to those. So that process will be ongoing as needs come forward to the government and or Dalhousie.
Bulk of the $120 million was not spent in March. It's been spent subsequent to that. Why does it make sense to put it on last year's books instead of this year's books?
We had the capacity in 1920 to do that, and we have a choice at the end of the year. We could take $100 million and we could put it on the debt, or we could take $100 million and we could make sure that Nova Scotians and small businesses in Nova Scotia that needed it got it.
Next question will go to Frank Campbell with the Chronicle Herald. Frank, hearing none. Next question will go to Elizabeth McSheffrey from Global.
Minister, I'm just wondering what your reaction was to the Premier's news that he's stepping down, and whether as Deputy Premier your responsibility or workload changes in any way in the next few months.
Well, I will tell you that Premier McNeil is still the Premier. He is still the leader of the Liberal Party. He is still the leader of our government, and I will continue to work with him in my capacity as Deputy Premier and as Finance Minister.
Do you have a follow-up, Elizabeth?
And even just a little bit, are you considering a run?
We're here to talk about public accounts for 1920.
Next question will go to Natasha Pace with CTV.
Just following up on Elizabeth's question, is that something you would consider, or are you open to it? A lot of people are obviously throwing your name around.
Natasha answers.
As a follow-up, my answer is the same.
Natasha, do you have any questions related to public accounts? Chris Helleff with News 95.7. Do you have any questions for the Minister?
Yeah, just a general question. You characterized the economic position at the end of 2019 as being a very strong financial standing for the province. I guess, based on these numbers and based on where we're heading, how would you characterize our economic position now?
I would repeat that the good fiscal management that we had used in the first 6 or 7 years of our mandate led us to that strong economic financial position that we were in at the end of 1920. We will apply the same good principles of fiscal management as we did before. We know that COVID brought something that none of us could have anticipated, none of us could have planned for, because none of us knew it was going to come here or when it was going to come here. So we could not plan for something that we didn't know. It was something we couldn't control. But I believe that the strength of our government and the way we have managed fiscally will get us through the recovery stage, and we will continue to move this province forward economically in a good, positive way. We know that there will be changes in our revenue because of consumer confidence and consumer spending, all of those things that have to be rebuilt, but we'll be there to help those as they're being rebuilt.
Chris, do you have a follow-up? Hearing none, I'll go to the phones, to Keith Doucette with the Canadian Press.
Yes, I'd like to ask, I think Michael Gorman asked it in the technical briefing, but I'll ask it here. We seem to have an increasing reliance on transfer payments from Ottawa. It's significantly increasing year over year. Is this necessarily a good thing, Minister?
All provinces that are eligible do benefit from equalization payments from the federal government. There is a formula that is used. It's been used by the federal government to distribute funds to the provinces as needed. And so that, as a result of that formula and as a result of our situation in Nova Scotia, increasing population, if it's a per capita, that's certainly going to increase our allocations because our population is the highest it has been ever in Nova Scotia. So those things come together to help determine what that funding will be.
Keith, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Question will go to Tim Biscay with the Halifax Examiner. Tim, do you have a question for the minister?
I do. I'm not seeing, and I'm just asking how Northern Pulp is now going through bankruptcy procedures or court. Is the $85 million thereabouts owed to the province accounted for in this document?
I'll pass that on to Jeff.
Yeah, the outstanding loans from Northern Pulp are reflected in the books of the province.
Tim, do you have a follow-up question?
Well, I guess I was wondering, has the status of those loans been changed?
We probably would have to refer to Department of Business on that. It certainly would be being monitored, but I'm not aware that the current proceedings have triggered a substantial change. I don't think it's triggered a substantial change in our view at this point.
Next question will go to Cody McCachran with CKBW. Cody, do you have a question for the minister?
No, I do not.
Next question will go to Bill McEwish with CKOA. Bill, do you have a question for the minister? Hearing none, I'll go back around the room. Elizabeth McSheffrey has a question for the minister.
Yes, Minister. I wonder, obviously we know there's a large hole in the budget right now from COVID. I wonder if you anticipate in the years to come having to take cost-cutting measures to try and manage and recoup any of that, and what that might look like?
Thank you. Any changes that we would see would be in the 2021 budget, and we've just done the first forecast on that. The next forecast will be done in December. I expect during that period of time, the forecast in December will give a clearer picture of where we are then. So I know that we have declining revenue. We want to rebuild that. We want to get the economy going again, so that revenue can be built up. So that balance of revenue and expenses will be clearer when we do the forecast in December.
Mike Gorman with CBC.
Maybe I'm doing one of these things where I'm conflating numbers and I shouldn't do it, but Minister, you had talked about the decision to book money on this now closed fiscal year as opposed to the one we're in, and I'm just wondering, does that mean that had you not done that, had you put the money on the current fiscal year, that you'd be looking at a surplus of more than $100 million right now?
Well, if you're going to talk in numbers like $100 million, and the $100 million that went to Dow, we signed an agreement with Dow because we knew that that 100 million and maybe more is needed to help people recover and move out of the economic hardship of COVID. So that was a conscious decision to help Nova Scotians and to help small businesses with that 100 million.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, and we have this tricky balance where you close these books and we already know what the new books look like, but do you feel like there remains capacity within the province's finances to do extra work for people if it's required, as you've referred to this extra 50 million that's going to Dow, but do you believe that there's room to do even more as we get into the fall if businesses start failing or people are being turned out of their apartments or whatever other threats and concerns we've heard?
I would answer, Mike, that our priority is the public health of Nova Scotians, and we will continue to provide supports either to individuals or to small businesses as required. And that has been the way we've helped to build the economy. That's where small and large businesses and individuals have helped government with the economic growth in our province, and we'll be there to help them.
Back to Lindsay Armstrong. Oh, Rebecca.
Thanks.
Your name escaped me, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Can you comment on why it was Dow that was chosen to manage the $100 million and how that even came about, the agreement?
Dow certainly represents the expertise and the ability to take that and manage and administer those funds on behalf of government, and we're confident. We have, as I said, an advisory committee which will be working with the staff at Dow. So there's a link between government and Dalhousie, and we're very confident in their ability to do that. And it takes it off-site, and it allows a third party to administer that with the advisory council from government working with them.
How was it Dow that got into that opportunity, I guess?
We recognize that Dow had that expertise. That's not to say that other organizations or groups did not have that expertise, but we knew that Dow did, and we approached them, and they were willing to work with us.
Going back to the phones.
Rebecca.
Going back to the phones to those reporters who had questions. Tim Bousquet with the Examiner. Do you have any follow-up for the minister?
I do. I see that the supplementary volume was just published, and there's a slightly over $22 million payment to Bay Ferries. Does that relate to all of the costs related to the ferry to Maine, including the terminal upgrades, or is there additional costs over and above that?
That 22 million would be the upgrades to Bar Harbor, as well as the contractual obligations that we have with the operator.
Going to Keith Doucette with the Canadian Press. Keith, do you have any questions for the minister? Hearing none, that concludes our press.
Thank you.